Well, it's flu season, and EJ and I were both not immune. So we both got super sick over All-Star Week. In fact, most football media I know got super sick over All-Star Week. And so this episode's coming out way later than we originally wanted it to be coming out. But it's okay, because we're so late to this topic, i.e. the Super Bowl, that we have some other news that we also have to talk about that we wouldn't have got to talk about if we put this out earlier in the week. So we'll get to that news in just a second. Before we do, though, EJ, my friend, how are you?
Back on the mic for the first time in, I think we're just talking about it, 10 days, 11 days, which for us is a millennia. It feels like forever, but if I'd been on the mic before that, much like you, people wouldn't have liked the sounds that came out of my mouth. So
yeah, no, getting out of bed was a struggle here.
Yeah, the struggle is real, and happy to be back in the chair, happy to be back talking about football. And yes, the football world turns, maybe even especially during the Super Bowl week. It always seems like certain bits of news get reserved to get released during Super Bowl week for maximum impact, and then some things just happen.
Well, that first piece of news, which clearly was timed for Super Bowl week because it came out the day before Myles Garrett started doing the media rounds at Radio Row, he requested a trade. And not just in like a pay me more money kind of request, but in a I don't want to be here, we're not ready to win, I want to win, I want a Super Bowl ring. And he has spent basically all of Wednesday and Thursday going to every single media outlet in Radio Row and telling them that. Like, he is done with Cleveland. And at first I thought, well, there's no way the Browns are going to trade him because their asking price, which, like, I remember talking to a buddy I have over there, and I floated it months ago before any of this even happened, like speculating, like, what would the price even be? And it was higher than I thought anybody would be willing to pay, right? We're talking 3 first-round picks, maybe more type of price. So my first reaction was, well, there's no way Cleveland's going to trade him because nobody's going to pay that much, even for Myles Garrett, right? Now, with Myles going on this media tour and kind of pressing the issue and saying, like, I am not going back to Cleveland, I want to go to a contender, get rid of me, I almost kind of feel like the Browns aren't going to be able to play this game of, like, no, we're not trading him. I feel like they're going to have to do it at this point. The real question is, what's the price? I have no idea.
I think it's probably 2 ones. It also makes no sense for the Browns to do it from a financial standpoint. From Myles' side, look, he's getting up there in years. He has won every individual accolade there is. He wants to win the big one. He wants to win the ring. He wants the team success. That's what this is the ultimate team sport. And he believes that he is not going to get that in Cleveland. Certainly not before his leash on NFL life runs out. And that's what he's saying is, I've done that. I want to go. Now, from the Browns side, doesn't make any sense. He's got 2 years left on his deal. He's clearly their best player. He's one of the probably 5 best players in the league. They don't have to let him go. They can say, no, you're going to play. And his only recourse as a player is to sit out, to withhold services and say, no, I'm truly done. I'm not coming back on the field for you. That would be extreme, and it is possible. Will he do it? I don't know. There's been a lot of speculation on Media Row about, look, Myles Garrett's an interesting cat. He was coming into the league, and he has continued to be throughout his time in the league. And I don't think anybody really knows how committed he is to this particular stand, but I think we're going to find out. Are we done with this? Is he absolutely never going to be a Brown again? I don't buy that. I've seen lots of players put that stake in the ground and then say, well, it all came back together and I got what I really wanted and I'm happy to be a Brown. We'll see if that's his stance or if this is truly burning the boats. I will not step on the field for Cleveland again.
It does kind of feel like the media tour is burning the boats, right? It's not pussyfooting around. It's not leaving it vague of like, pay me more money. Like, he's straight up said, I think it was on Mina's show, that like quarterback is important to him. He wants to go to a place where the quarterback situation is settled. He even brought up, Washington with Jaden Daniels, even a young guy with superstar potential. The Eagles obviously intrigues him. He said that. And I think it was Rich Eisen asked him a little bit about the Luka trade and like an NFL comparison to it. And he said his comparison, Myles Garrett's personal comparison, would be like trading Josh Allen for Chris Jones. So even Myles Garrett has the perspective of, I'm a Hall of Fame pass rusher and quarterback is still more important than me. And that clearly is what he is prioritizing. So you can whittle the list of teams down even more because nobody's going to trade for Myles Garrett unless they also get an extension out of him. And so if he just says, I'm not going to sign an extension, they're not going to trade for him. So he kind of has power over where he goes in that regard. So I would just look at, especially NFC contenders, because I think the Browns want him out of the conference. NFC contenders with quarterback settled. What's the list? It's not as many as you think.
No.
So I would look at Washington. I would look at Philly if they somehow have the money for it. I haven't even checked on their financial situation. Like, that would just be ridiculous. And they would also probably have to send a player back, I imagine, to make the finances work. Dare I say Green Bay?
You could, but I'd say Detroit first. I mean, I really think that...
Man, Detroit and if you put Myles and Aiden, good God.
I've heard it floated, and it makes a ton of sense for the reasons that you're talking about. They definitely want him out of the AFC. They do not want to be seeing him on their potential road to anything. Again, the balance in the AFC is a bit different. There are a lot of quarterbacks there for sure, but if you're talking about teams with quarterbacks settled in the NFC and teams that could really use his skills, like Detroit is the absolute lockdown if they could do anything. And let's be honest, the cap is not a myth, but when you're talking about a player like Myles Garrett, you can make it work financially. Like, you can and will make it work for a player of his ilk. They don't come available typically. And if they do, and it's a huge need for you, and you think you are a team like Detroit that's been really close, and that is your one player away, you make it work. Like, there are ways to make it work. And I think if he was open to that, they certainly would. And if they're not asking, I would be surprised.
Another potential suitor, obviously, would be the Chicago Bears, who unfortunately, and this broke like an hour before we started recording, Virginia Halas McCaskey, age 102, has finally passed away. I'll be honest, I would love to be as lucky as her to live that long and to see as much football as she did. The last Bears play she ever saw was beating the Green Bay Packers. So shout out to you, Virginia. Salute to you for being one of the last living connections to the origin of the sport that we love so much. Obviously, there's a lot of intense feelings about Bears ownership over the last 20 years, I guess you could say. Yeah. But I truly do offer my condolences to her family, and also condolences to longtime Bears fans that have watched her stewardship of the team for over 40 years at this point. EJ, the question I pose to you is, what the hell happens now? Because there's a lot of family members that are now involved in how things run. And I don't know where we go from here.
I don't think anybody truly knows. Before I dive into all that, I do want to offer condolences to the McCaskey family at large. Certainly a life well lived, a matriarch in every sense of the word for that clan, and did it very well and in a classy way for a long time. Yes, there are many feelings about Chicago Bears ownership, and we're going to get all of them spilling out now into the public view. This is going to create that. There's been a lot of speculation about when this occurred, whether it was this year, next year, 3-4 years from now, what would happen? Because, as you mentioned, I think, gonna have to fact check it, but I think there are 11 family members with shares. There are also 2 heirs of former Halas business partners, bringing the total of shareholders to 13. That's a lot of cooks in the kitchen. Many of them are not particularly interested in football. by the sound of it.
Half of them want to sell.
No,
So it's
any
like,
of
what do
them
you do?
They're interested in what it represents. So now there will be some kind of consolidation because we don't see those types of ownership arrangements. Virginia had a larger interest than any of them. They were not all equal shares, but it is a controlling interest in name only, not in percentage wise. It was certainly not 51%. And we're going to see how this all plays out. There are going to be a lot of politics around it and how it gets consolidated and whether or not the overall ownership of the Bears stays within the family with someone stepping forward, which has not been the speculation. The speculation has been an outside owner or ownership group, as we typically see now because of the increased cost, coming in and basically purchasing a controlling interest in the Bears, paying off most of the family heirs, and having an ownership group somewhat. I mean, obviously the most recent one is Washington. That's probably the model. There are very few people that can afford that. The list is pretty small. The list of people that want to be NFL owners is very long. The list of people with the actual money to compete in that league is not as long as you might think.
The really intriguing part of this to me is, I mean, we're talking about the Chicago Bears here. Like, this is one of the flagship franchises of the most expensive sport to buy into if you're trying to buy a team, like anywhere in the world. The Commanders just sold for $6.3 billion. I would have to imagine the Bears are going to go for 8+. The amount of people that have that much money available to them to buy the Bears is not a long list. So it's either going to have to be a very, very wide-ranging group, or we're talking like Bezos stepping in, right, to make an offer. Because if the Commanders are going for 6.3, the freaking Chicago Bears, the only NFL team in the third largest media market in the country, when the two other biggest media markets in the country are both split amongst, I don't know how many other teams, right? Because it's not just about football and basketball. It's also about college football and baseball and like the other markets are distracted. Chicago is the Bears. So if you run Chicago, or rather run Chicago sports, like that's worth a lot of money. So I don't know who's going to step forward to buy this team. It's got to be somebody with deep pockets. And I just hope to God that it's somebody who is willing to kind of go the Walton family route or the Kroenke, which, I mean, they're actually technically the same family, which is show up, buy the team, write checks, and just piss off, right? That's what I hope, is let the football people do football people stuff. You just write checks, go away, smile and wave. You get handed the trophy at the end. Like, that is my one hope here. Whether we're going to be that lucky, I have no idea.
No.
Speaking of getting handed the trophy, by the way, probably time we actually talk about the Super Bowl. This is a game that I almost feel like we've been on a collision course for a while now. Some would argue basically the entire season. And, there were other teams, obviously, that could have knocked them off along the way, whether it's Buffalo on the AFC side, obviously Detroit or Minnesota on the NFC side. But it just kind of felt like by the time we got to about week 12, week 13, it just felt like these two teams were going to end up here. And they did. They play very different styles, and styles make fights. And even though there is so much different about these teams between now and the last time they met in the Super Bowl 2 years ago, and I would say even now and the last time they met, period, in 2023, there's a lot different, but there's also a lot the same, right? And I think that familiarity adds a layer of intrigue to this matchup because they know each other so well that I don't think they're really going to surprise each other that much.
I don't think they really want to. I think they both are very set on what they are good at doing and what they want to accomplish. And I think we're going to see them both set out to do that. And whichever one of them is most successful in doing that is going to win the game. And I think it comes down to some very singular points. In my case, I've isolated really one point that I think is the crux of the game. And if Philly's able to pull it off, I think they win the game. And if KC's able to keep them from doing it, I think KC will win the game. And I think it's just that simple. And it's crazy because if you've been listening, as I'm sure you have, to all the coverage of this game, because there's more coverage on this single game than any other game this season. Goes on for a week. Everybody talks about it. There's lots of angles that come up, but I really think this does come down to, as you said, their sort of core personality and what they want to get done. And that's their core personality as of right now, what they are both best at. And we're going to see who's better at it. And that makes for a fun championship game. I think it makes for a fun atmosphere. We've got, very good coaching on both sides. We obviously have tons of star players. Neither one of these teams, as you said, is a dark horse. You said by week 12 or week 13. One of us in the season prediction episode actually picked this matchup, so it was a little bit earlier than that.
Yeah, by August for you.
Yeah, by late August for me. And again, that's just lucky. We know there's so many turns and twists. We cover all of them, injuries up and down throughout the season. And it just so happened that it worked out that way. And it is still a good matchup. I'm excited about that because sometimes, I could have said that in August and one of these teams could have, limped through or had a miracle run in the playoffs. Doesn't feel like that at all. Feels like they both ended up here for a reason because they're both good football teams. They're both leaning on their strengths. And now we're going to see which of those strengths is greater.
The matchup that I'm mostly focused on here, and spoiler alert, I'm picking the Chiefs to three-peat. The reason why I'm picking the Chiefs to three-peat is maybe not the reason that a lot of people would hone in on, right? It's not about Patrick Mahomes. It's not about Travis Kelce. It's not about Andy Reid. To me, hell, it's not even about Chris Jones. It's about Steve Spagnuolo and how he uses Chris Jones and Karlaftis and McDuffie and. And I spent a lot of time going back through my notes of every big game that Spags has coached in, going back to 2007, because I was sick and I had a lot of time on my hands. So I went back to my 2007 All-22 from when he was the Giants DC against the Patriots. I looked at his matchups against Brady since he got to KC. I looked at his Super Bowl matchup against Philly a couple years ago. I looked at his rematch against Philly in 2023. It was week 11 off the top of my head. And a pattern that you see with Steve Spagnuolo is once he kind of feels out a matchup, or rather feels out a quarterback over his first couple meetings, and he understands what agitates them, what makes them hold the ball for a half a tick, and especially on the offensive line side, how he can attack protections, because he is the best DC I've ever seen in terms of figuring out how to attack protections. Once he kind of feels that out over the first couple matchups, he's kind of got you. And, we talk about the 2007 game against New England all the time, but in Brady's last 4 matchups against Spags, if I recall correctly, he was 1-3, right? Including in the playoffs and big games and everything like that. And to be honest, if the Chiefs had any sort of offensive line against Tampa, he might have blanked them, right? And so I look at how Spags kind of evolves his game plans and iterates on them from meeting to meeting against these quarterbacks as he builds the book on them, as well as building the book on opposing offensive line coaches and opposing offensive linemen. And that inspired me to look at how he brought pressure on Jalen Hurts in 2023 versus 2022. And forgive me for this being so long, but I want people to understand what I'm talking about here. There's a bunch of different ways you can bring pressure, right? You can just do a straight 4-man rush. You can do a man pressure. Think of like cover 1 dog. Cover 1 dog is just, we're running cover 1, right? So man coverage across the board, single high safety, normal cover 1. Dog means that extra linebacker that is normally playing like a whole zone, short and intermediate to act as helper. Dog means he's blitzing, right? So 5 rushing, 5 in man coverage, 1 deep safety. There's 0, right? Which is no deep safety, man coverage. Everybody else is blitzing. Usually it's at least 6 guys. It can be up to 7 or 8. Then you have what's called a fire zone. Still 5 guys rushing, still 6 in coverage, but it's in zone coverage rather than man coverage. And there could be a 2 deep fire zone. There could be a 3 deep fire zone. There's a whole bunch of different iterations of that. And then you have simulated pressures, which is still a 4-man rush, but they're bringing 4 from funky angles. And that can be a nickel, a safety, a linebacker with the same number of guys, but it's going to look like a pressure. It's a simulated pressure. If you're looking at the 2022 Super Bowl, Spags called a lot of the same blitzes against Hurts that he did against Brady, especially going back to 2007. And Hurts was exceptional against them. If I recall correctly, he was 7 for 8 for like 100 yards against those blitzes in the Super Bowl. And a big reason for that is he's mobile. Tom Brady is not. So if you miss on Hurts and you're 1 down in coverage, sometimes 2 down in coverage, there's a bunch of space to work with. He's going to pick you apart because the whole thing is get him on the ground before he can punish the space that we leave on the back end. And so Spags brought 32.4% blitz rate in that Super Bowl, 14.9% stunt rate, and only a 16.7% simulated pressure rate, meaning, again, rushing with 4, but it's a funky 4, right? He learned from that, even though they did win that game. Hurts had a great day. And in the 2023 rematch, the very next year, he upped his simulated pressure rate to 35.3%. Right? He more than doubled his sim pressure calls, more than doubled his sim pressure rate. And as a result, they got 5 sacks in that game and held him to like 150 yards passing. Now, Eagles did win the rematch because Hurts got a couple rushing touchdowns and you know, the KC offense was, let's say, not doing great. But you could see in real time how Spags was adjusting his approach to Hurts, right? Which is, I'm still going to bring pressure and I'm still going to attack your protections and force you into giving us the matchup we want, which is Chris Jones on your worst guy 1-on-1, or leaving McDuffie free off the edge, or forcing you to spend 4 guys to block 3 and we're handling 4 receivers with 7 in coverage. Like, he was kind of giving them these no-win situations with these sim pressures off the edge, and he got 3 sacks on the same pressure path in 1 half, right? But you could see him learn in real time, like, oh, I can't blitz Hurts. I have to bring sims. I have to win with 4. I have to leave 7 in coverage, because in these last 2 games, when rushing 5 or more guys, they got 0 sacks. When rushing 4 or fewer, they got 7. And the reason why I think KC's going to win, to circle back to my original point, is because not only did Spags have the learning experience from the first time, he had the learning experience from the second time, i.e., what worked. They still lost that game, but they were fantastic against that Eagles passing game without really blitzing that much. And so I look at this matchup again, and if they can hold down this passing game once again and, you know, weaponize Leo Chanel, weaponize these linebackers, bring pressures on early downs, and try to get Saquon into TFLs or tackles for no gain and almost force them to rely on that passing game, we know Spags already knows how to stop it. We know he already knows how to handle these protections and attack these protections. So for me, long way to go for a short drink of water, this is setting up to be a Spags masterclass schematically, and I would not be surprised whatsoever if neither of these teams doesn't go over 20 points, specifically because of that.
I agree with you that it's going to be a Spags masterclass, and I came at a similar point from the other direction, which we often do. I really think this comes down to the Nick Bolton game, and I'll tell you why.
Oh, that's a call.
Philly wants to ram the ball down Casey's throat. Like, that's how they got here, and they're very, very good at it, and they've been able to do that literally against everyone. And if they can do it and be efficient and explosive enough, I think they win the game. So Casey's going to have to stop that. And Spags knows that. He's not a spring chicken. He is well aware of what they need to do. So in order to counter that, Spags is going to have to try and force those negative plays in the run that you talked about. That means committing extra players. And it also means Nick Bolton has to win, because Nick Bolton is very good against the run. These are 2 of the best tackling teams in the NFL. And the offensive line is going to be keying on trying to get Nick Bolton in disadvantageous situations where they can pin him out of the play and make him not a factor. If Stoutland and the Eagles are able to do that, if they're able to pry open those gaps, there's not really anything that stops them. These are the Visigoths at the gates, and they're just going to march down. And the reason that they're going to be able to win the game is because that serves them in two purposes. One, keeps them out of high-risk passing situations, which they are capable in, but certainly not as practiced, again, in this iteration this year. The other thing is it reduces time of possession for Mahomes and the Chiefs, right? It literally takes the ball out of his hands because both of these teams are capable of mounting long, sustained drives, which is what defenses have tried to make you do for the last 3 years in the NFL. And both of these teams are successful at doing it. They can put together 12 play drives that take 7, 8, 9 minutes. So this might be one of the shortest Super Bowls ever because both teams are geared to do that. And, yes, they can be explosive, but they're explosive in these sort of very methodical, plodding ways. And that could take time off the clock fast. And I think the ones that are going to lose the most are the advertisers, but we'll talk about that in a little bit.
I was just about to bring that up. It's like,
there's
not 11 plus possessions, everybody's freaking out. Like they're just going to do TV timeouts for whatever reason.
That's
like,
right.
Pat, we actually need you to flop this time. Like we need an injury timeout. Okay. Like Warner Brothers paying us a shitload of money here.
That's right. Somebody needs to wipe their nose. We're taking another 3 TV timeouts right here. If Philly is unable to displace Kansas City's run defense, if Spags is able to, shut off that spigot enough that drives are starting to stall and they're having to go tush push all the time, and it basically puts them in higher leverage situations. You're going to have to watch leverage in this game. It's really important. If Philly is facing a lot of 2nd and 4 or 2nd and 3, KC's in trouble. If they're turning it into 2nd and 7, 2nd and 8, KC's holding the line, and it will eventually force Philly to pivot. If Spags can do that, can shut off this Philly run game, and Philadelphia has to pivot to that play action pass game, this game is in Spags' hands. He's going to bring blitzes, and I will posit that he is going to bring a very specific type of blitz. He is not going to man blitz. He is going to zone blitz the living piss out of Jalen Hurts. That turn of events, if it occurs, favors KC so heavily. At that point, the Chiefs are winning this game. Why is this a thing? Because Hurts has been awful against zone blitzes this year. He has a 20% sack rate versus zone blitzes. One out of every 5. Like
really?
If you go through if you add, yes, this is a true stat. If you go through and add in the playoffs, it's 18%. It drops a little bit. He got a little bit better. So against man blitzes, he absolutely eats. Against zone blitzes, 1 out of every 5 times you bring one, you're putting him on the ground. And if you add those up throughout a game, especially a high leverage game like the Super Bowl, you've got them where you want them. But again, in order to earn that right, Kansas City has to stop what Philly wants to do first and is best at and what got them here. So again, we're going to see strength and strength. We're going to see Stoutland in the O-line with Saquon behind him going, Nick Bolton, we are going to come and just bury you on every play we can. And we're going to make the little guys tackle the big guys or try and block the big guys. And eventually that will favor Philly. If Spags, as he has done many, many, many times before, is able to blunt that strength and he gets into being able to actually go after Jalen Hurts, if they earn the right to rush the passer, I think Philly's in trouble.
That's why I kind of feel like it might honestly be a Leo Chanel game because they don't have anybody else who can look at all the size that Philly has on that offensive line and be like, yeah, I can bench press that. Like Leo and Chris, honestly, and I guess George are the only ones, but as far as like 2nd level defenders, it's just Leo. So, and he is a package player for them. He's really only on the field when they're in base, but I kind of, is it crazy for me to say like, hey, on certain downs and distances, swap him out? Like if it's a 2nd and medium, and we really don't want to get them 4 yards to set up a 3rd and short, swap him out for Bolton and just say, Leo, kill. Like, just run forward and hit that dude. Like, because like my nightmare scenario is they're just consistently in short yardage, right? Because we know they're going to get it. And I don't know if Spags going to do that, but I almost feel like from a personnel perspective, 2nd and medium, Leo, get in there. Am I crazy for that?
I don't think you're crazy, and I think we might see Bolton and Leo playing together because, again, the Chiefs have to win that matchup against the run enough. They can't just win it once or twice. Like, Philly's not going to stop, right? They're smart enough to know that the real gains from this approach are going to come later in the game. So it's not going to be like they're going to get blunted once or twice on the run and go, oh, now we have to throw 50 times. Like, Philly's not going to do that. So
if Philly's throwing 50 times, they lost big.
Oh, it's 100%. That's a very good indicator. However, the Chiefs are going to have to do this over and over again on defense. And again, I said I think it's going to be a high leverage game because both teams can grind it out. Both teams tackle very well. Both teams limit explosive plays. So they're both going to just sort of make you earn it. And it's going to be this grind it out type affair. And as we've talked about throughout the entire playoffs, that just cranks up the difficulty, right? That just, okay, we're going to get less chances. Everyone means more. Mistakes cost more if we make them. So it's that game that I think at that point plays into the hands of the Chiefs because they have this typical boa constrictor mentality. They make less mistakes than their opponent, and they win it in the end on a close drive where they put the ball in Pat Mahomes' hands. He's got a couple minutes left. And the other time that I'm really interested in is I'm possibly more interested in who wins this coin toss than I've ever been. I don't really care about coin tosses, but if Casey is receiving the ball in the second half, that last 4 minutes of the first half, to getting the ball in the second half, to getting to the final 2 or 3 minutes of the game, having held it close, like that is the Chiefs game. That's why they are so good at this brand of football. And if they can set it up, if they can win those high leverage spots along the way and keep it even, this is Kansas City's game. I would never bet against them in a game like that. But if Philadelphia can grind them down and be explosive as they have been in the run game and get touchdowns out of that, I think Kansas City, could lose this game. I think Philly has that amount of power, but that is the one path. If they're going to try and mix it up and, we're going to throw in some passing game. Like you said, Spags has a very good book on the opponent here, and I don't think he's going to allow that to occur. So it's really about controlling that run, and if they can do it, KC can win the game. If they can't, they're going to get run over like everybody else. And Philly might be the one team in the league that can do that.
Now, for those of you that have been waiting patiently for the half hour plus that we've been at this, and they're waiting to see our entry for the big game, again, contractually, we have to call it the big game in this part of the show.
Ooh, the big game.
So the lawyers don't come after us. Over on Underdog, when we do our pick'ems for every single week, obviously we only have one game to pick from for this one. And I wanted to take into account everything that we talked about today when building this, because it's not just about, analyzing individual matchups and schematic tendencies and everything like that. It's also about analyzing game script and how we think this game is going. And I don't mean like, they're writing a script. I mean, like literally, like what is the flow of the game that we expect? How many possessions do we expect per team? Coin toss, to your point, plays into it here. So just how do we expect this game to flow, and how is that going to impact the production of these players? And when EJ and I were kind of crafting this entry, here's what we came up with. So Jalen Hurts lower than 214.5 passing, which is honestly ideal for them. They don't really want to rely on him to throw, not because they don't think he can. We saw what happened in the first time they went against the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. Like, he obviously can throw. It's more so if Jalen has less than 214.5, that means Saquon is eating, which is why we paired that with Saquon higher than 21.5 rushing attempts, because that is their key to victory. On the other end, sticking with that same general game script, Mahomes lower than 35.5 for longest completion. If you're looking at the structure of the Vic Fangio defense, I kind of feel like this is going to have to be a death by 1,000 paper cuts type of passing game, which of course favors DeAndre Hopkins, because if they get anywhere in the medium to high red zone, that is DeAndre Hopkins back shoulder fade territory. So we went higher than half a touchdown on Hopkins. That's the one I don't feel amazing about, but hey, that's why we do flex entries, so we only need 4 out of 5. And then George Karlaftis higher than half a sack, because I do feel like, if you're looking at all the stunts and sim pressures and blitzes that Spag styles up, a lot of it is using Chris Jones or Trent McDuffie to flush people into George Karlaftis. So I feel like he's going to be a beneficiary of that. Now, beyond the Hopkins TD, if any of these worries you, and you're a new customer at Underdog, and you want to do a pick'em just for the big game, of course, you can get a Travis Kelce free pick for this game. That's only for new customers. So if you think he can get at least a yard, that pick is for you. Simultaneously, if you're already on Underdog, they do have a no sweat token for both new customers and existing customers, where if you use that no sweat token, even if you don't win on your entry, you get bonus credit back. So again, you literally lose nothing. That's why it's a no sweat token. So whatever you want to play, whether you're new or existing, you can do so on Underdog Fantasy. It's available in over 30 states, including California, Missouri, Texas. There's a whole map we'll put on screen for everywhere it's available to play. You can do pick'ems either for, obviously, football or basketball, hockey, baseball, when we get there in a couple months. Whatever you want to do pick'ems with, you can do so. You just got to choose higher or lower, and that's it. So hopefully we do well on this one. We tend to do better on pick'ems as the season goes on because we get more data and we get a better feel for these teams. We did pretty well in the playoffs overall. EJ, do you have any hard objections to these 5?
The only one, and it's the one we were talking about as we were building it. Whenever you're picking a touchdown on a Super Bowl, because as you go back, and of course all the networks are playing old Super Bowls this week, so if you're in a bar getting lunch or whatever, you're seeing a Super Bowl 10 years ago. I remember that. There's this weird factor for Super Bowls. Mm-hmm. And it's not that it's any much weirder than a typical game, but there is so many more eyeballs on this game, and they just last. They are historical. They're the last game of the season. Everybody watches this game. And there always seems to be things that you would think of as atypical in these games, whether it's touchdown scorers, whether it's, rookie running backs going off, or, the lesser used defensive back coming up with a pick or 2. And you're like, oh yeah, I remember that guy was the, defensive MVP of the game, came up with 2 picks. He only had 3 picks all year, and he got 2 in the Super Bowl. Like, there's just a weirdness factor. So whenever you're going after one guy for a touchdown, it's not that I don't think that D-Hop is a good option. It's especially with the Chiefs offense, which in some ways reminds me of the 49ers offense in terms of, hey, we're just going to spin a wheel this week and see who gets the touchdown. And that makes me a little bit nervous. But again, with all the options that you brought up, you've got your no sweat token, you've got your Kelce free pick if you're new. Like, you can avoid that one because that's probably the highest leverage pick in the bunch.
Reminder, use promo code BOOTLEG either at the QR code that's been on the screen all episode or at the link in the description. Not only do you get that Kelce free pick, not only do you get the no sweat token, you also get up to $1,000 in deposit bonuses. So once again, thank you to Underdog for really making this season special for both of us and funding everything that we do here. They are, as always, a pleasure to work with. I also want to thank all of our executive producers, Fitzy, Connor, Eichen, Liam, and Mike over on the Bootleg Patreon. Couldn't have got through this season without you guys. And even for all of our silent viewers here who, whether you show up at live streams or show up at in-person events or not, and you just watch these episodes on YouTube or you listen to them in the car, if you joined us on this journey for this season, we really do appreciate you because we couldn't do all of this without you guys consuming the content so that we can then take it to sponsors and say, hey, look, people watch our show. Please pay us money so we can keep doing it. EJ, before we finally get out of here, do you have any final words for the folks at home that have been there with us the entire way?
Just enjoy the game. Like, this is the last one we're going to see for a while. And regardless if you have Chiefs fatigue or you hate Philly with your absolute core of your being, like, remember that this is the last competitive football we are going to see for months and months. And 3 months from now, you will be begging for a game half this good. So just enjoy the Super Bowl, enjoy friends, family, however you watch it. consume the best Super Bowl dishes. If you want to put your best Super Bowl recipe down in the comments, we are always game for something new to nosh on during the game. It's going to be a fun one. It's a great matchup in terms of there's a ton of coaching legends in this game. Obviously, lots of players on the field who are going to, eventually be Hall of Famers. This is a fun one. So just enjoy the game. It's been a long season. It's been a fun season. We've really enjoyed interacting, with each other and with all of you about the thing that we love to talk about the most, which is football. So just, have that mentality and it'll be a good Sunday.
Did I tell you the wings Tyler's making on Sunday, by the way?
Jesus. Now I'm jealous. The crazy thing about this is I've had Tyler's wings and they are amazing. I love Tyler's wings. I have been so not hungry for 10 days. I've eaten like less than a meal a day since last Monday. We're recording this on a Thursday. It doesn't matter what the food is. I'm kind of like, oh, food. I remember when I liked that. So Tyler's wings, one of the greatest delicacies in the world. Love them to death. I'm going to hear this and my brain's going to be like, you should want these. And my body's going to be like, dude, you haven't eaten anything in like 11 days. What are you talking about?
So we have a couple different contenders for the fourth wing. And keep in mind for the folks at home, his method is he smokes them and then he air fries them.
Right, so and it is delicious.
He's doing a buffalo ranch, which is always great. Garlic parm, because you have to, for the people that don't like the spicy stuff. He's doing a salt and vinegar, which I know doesn't sound like a good wing flavor, but trust me, it's a good wing flavor. And then for the fourth one, he's trying to pick between a dry Cajun rub, gochujang wings, or a jalapeno basil pesto wing, which is what I'm trying to convince him to do.
I would vote for the last two. Not that I have anything against a Cajun rub, and certainly it's appropriate with the Super Bowl being in New Orleans. But the last two would be my vote if I had one.
Well, I know you're a sucker for gochujang, so.
Oh, absolutely. But the other one is just intriguing in terms of flavor profile. Like
it just sounds good.
See how it came out. Yeah, it does. It sounds interesting and good. And if anybody can pull it off, it's Tyler. So there we go.
All right. Again, leave your Super Bowl recipes down in the comments below. Thank you once again to all of our patrons. Thank you to all of our silent listeners that just pop by and listen during the entire year. Thank you to Homage. Thank you to Manscaped. Thank you to Underdog. We are probably going to take a week and reset and then come back for draft season because it's almost about that time for 10 Gems and going to Combine and posting interviews with players from Shrine Bowl, whether it's Kenneth Grant, whether it's, who else do we get? We got Siobhan Ravel, we got Chris Paul, a lot of player interviews to come as well. So again, stick around for draft season and we will see you very soon.